Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.3 demo for the piece I call A Dusty Path. Now, this is technically fan art for a game called A Dark Room, and unfortunately, simply by looking at this, it kind of gives away a big part of the game. Sort of like the major spoiler of the game. So if you want to play that game, just leave now, even though it's probably already too late. So I'll just go ahead and explain it. So spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so in A Dark Room, it's like this text-based adventure thing. I recommend trying it out because it's just really kind of quirky and weird and fun. And a few years ago, me and some of my friends got obsessed with playing it. And if you actually beat the game, you basically reveal that like your character is actually an alien. The entire time you didn't really realize that. You thought you were a person in like this wasteland, and then as things slowly reveal themselves and you figure everything out, you realize you're an alien. Now, the reason why this alien is carrying like a katana and like a rifle and a steel sword and like all these things and some beef jerky is because in the game, these are the items you get, and since everything is driven through text and numbers, it's actually really kind of funny when you think about it, because your character is carrying like all of this shit, and there's no possible way that would look anything but ridiculous. But it's just because it's all built around mechanics, not necessarily plausibility. So I thought way back when it'd be fun to draw the character, and I just sort of thought it'd be fun to draw like this alien who's just traipsing around the desert, which in the game is referred to as a dusty path. And so I just wanted to depict it as though it was like this sort of, deserty type area with these mesas in the background and stuff, and these other rock formations. And then he's just carrying like all the junk that you get in the game. So that is the setup for this strange character. This drawing that you see was originally done by me a bunch of years ago. I don't remember exactly how long ago, but let's say like 4, probably more like 4 actually, years ago. And I just did it with like a micron pen, and that's it. And it was really fun to do. And I used to do little scribbly drawings like that every now and then just to sort of get the kinks out, and this particular one went a little bit further into something that I really enjoyed. So I figured in order to sort of match that scribbly, higher energy, rougher around the edges nature, the turpentine brush work that I've been doing recently seemed like the perfect thing to apply to this. So this also represents essentially like the end of this turpentine brush phase. As I mentioned in the previous video, don't think that means it's going away. It just means that my, these like one after the other pieces all in that style are going to be done for now, while I just do some other things and explore and come back to it and all that kind of stuff. So what you see here is going to be largely the same process that you've seen in all of these. It's the turpentine brush being painted like with flats, and then eventually some shadow layers and light layers and bounce layers, reflection, all of that kind of stuff. So the process is unchanged. It's really more about the application of that process to try and make new decisions, like around this character and how I'm going to handle, for instance, what you see right here, where he's going to have this like lighter patch under his neck and on his chest, and then on his palm of his hand, and what other little things like that and other choices I make, how all of that is used while still using all of the other methods. I feel like that was a coherent thought. Maybe it wasn't. Anyways, there's not going to be a whole lot to say, so I'm going to come in and out. If you feel like I'm not explaining the turpentine brush well enough, there's a few other videos before this, like 4 or 5 other videos before this, that go pretty in depth. So I'm going to bail, and then I will come back when I spot things that really need some explaining or are just interesting in some way. One thing that's probably worth pointing out is you can see that his arms, both of his arms, and his neck and head and stuff are all on the same layers. And that's because I already anticipated that with all those little items in his backpack and what he's holding in his hat and like all these things, that I was going to have a layer situation. With Procreate's layer limit, I just knew that I was going to have to be a little bit more economic. So instead of doing a lot of things in separate layers, like the head separate from the neck or the foreground arm separate from the background arm and things like that, all of those are on their own layer, just one singular layer. That's why when you see me going in and painting this blue jean jacket, I'm having to paint it as though it is on top of everything, because it is on top of everything. So it's actually the shape that's carving out the form of the arm. The arm exceeded the lines from a yellow paint point of view, and now the blue has come in to add some definition to that. Now the cool thing is, since this style with this brush I usually do messier, it's fine. If there's little errors there with the way that I've painted over it, it's absolutely fine, because if I have some of that background shine through, or I have these little gaps or these little imperfections, it actually adds some character to the piece instead of being a problem that I have to go in and fix. great example of how the paint process can yield different ideas and improve upon some of the original line art is here. You can see it here when I do his little shirt that's peeking out under his leather armor. In the game you can have leather armor, that's one of the armors you get. So in this idea, he's got leather armor over a shirt, and then over the leather armor he's got the jean jacket. And so here you can see in this red shirt that's that he's got on here, it's actually got a plaid pattern on it. And that's just kind of cool because, you know, already with that trucker hat and then this jean jacket, you can sort of start to feel like where he got the clothes from. Like, you can get a sense for the area that he's in, and adding just little touches like that, I think, really tells the story better. And it's just as simple as changing the textile of the shirt that he's wearing.
should also take a second to mention that the sword that's in his hand, each one of those individual elements of the sword are on their own layer, and all of those layers are behind all of the layers of the alien himself. At this point, that's something that I do not want to take a risk on of it being
not being separate, and I know that I can work with those all as separate objects now, and then when I start feeling the pinch of layers later, I can start making some choices about what gets merged. For instance, on that little grenade that you can see in his backpack, that grenade, the little metal, what is that, the release, the whatever it is that makes the grenade live, that is separate from the grenade. That's a little granular for this piece, but I knew that if I was going in there and noodling in with paint, I would want to have those selections. As soon as that grenade gets completed from the shadow phase, then those will get merged together easily, and a lot of stuff in that backpack will get merged together in the same manner. You can also see here that the patterning on his skin is turned off. Those seem like layers that would be very easy. They're there, they just turn back on again. Very easy to merge into the skin, and they are very easy to merge into the skin, but I wanted to leave them separate just for a little bit because as the shadow layers start getting applied, I didn't know if I was going to want some of those stripes to get a little darker or maybe have the white, the lighter color on his like throat to get a little bit lighter or a little bit less light. So I wanted those still to be adjustable because as those shadows come in, it could impact everything. However, those are like the number one candidates for getting merged into their bottom layers, just because they are following the form, and there's no there's no physical depth to those individual things. The lightness and the stripes are just flush with his skin. So keeping them separate is really just a matter of being able to adjust them, not needing to use them as a selection. So I knew that because this character is depicted out in this like wasteland all the time in the game, I was going to have to do that for the piece. I wanted it all to be very bright, actually, with just sort of like a strong downward sunlight. That was the plan from the beginning. But now that I had this sort of AO pass on the shadows, I wanted to put a background in so that I could start thinking about how all of that was going to look. It'll get turned on and off throughout the process, and it'll get tweaked. I throw it in kind of messy at first, and then as time goes on, I adjust it and add some depth with some additional atmospherics and like adjusting opacities. But right now I just threw it in so that I could start feeling what this whole piece looked like with that background in there. But now we're on to the direct shadow. As you can see, especially when you look at like the blade, it's a very, very red shadow. The one that I used for the ambient occlusion is slightly desaturated, but the one that's used for the direct one is pretty heavy. And that was all on purpose because it's a direct light coming down. The shadows will be a little bit stronger, but I didn't want the shadows to go like black or to go just sort of uninteresting. I wanted it to still have a stylized vibe in the lighting, so that's why everything still stayed pretty red in the shadows. going to take a minute to go through the usual ramblings that I always go through. If I had drawn anything in this, it would have been done using the fat pencil, which is linked down below. The coloring method that I use, by method I mean the way that I organize my layers, is called the Select Paint, Select Clear method. It is also linked down below. The brush that I'm using in this is a standard brush in Procreate called the Turpentine brush. My settings on my Apple Pencil and on my iPad and everything are just standard. Occasionally I will tweak a brush because I wanted to do something a little bit different, but almost everything that I use is stock. Again, the reason that I do that is because I like the ability to go from my machine to somebody else's machine to somebody else's iPad to whatever, and just work with the default things, as opposed to getting used to something that maybe is really special. Incidentally enough, it's the same reason why I don't play World of Warcraft with a lot of add-ons, although I play with some. Anyways, those are the normal things that I sort of ramble through in every one of these videos. I can't stress enough, I don't have brushes to sell. If you want to use the fat pencil, I show down below how to set that up, although that video is dated and I should update it because the interface is slightly changed. So there will also be, for those of you who have been wondering, an update to several of my more general videos, things like the fat pencil, things like Select Paint, Select Clear, things like what's another one, like my methodologies that I've done 2 times before. I will be updating all of those. I'm kind of waiting to see if Procreate's going to make any like really big changes so that I can do a video that incorporates all those big changes, but it's a little hard to predict that. So anyways, that's all the usual stuff. That's sort of me doing like the usual housekeeping, and now we'll get back to watching this direct shadow. I will do some of the reflected light from the sky. You're going to see it first because of the way the layer stack is, and using select paint, select clear, you're going to see it coming in on the blade of the sword first, and then it'll start going through all of the other parts. This was done using the same blue that's in the sky, except it was lowered in opacity. You will see, I believe, some little flickers of it when it gets changed through a couple of different layer settings and stuff, but then it settles on just being a lowered opacity normal layer. My favorite part of the coloring process. This is where I do like a bounce pass and like an extra materials, I guess you could say, kind of pass. I go through and like on the eye I put like some reflection from his cheek, I guess you could call that a cheek. On the sword there's some reflection, on the katana there's reflection of like his skin onto the blade, and the sand below onto the blade, and the bullets onto the blade. So just trying to sort of go through this and analyze each material and say to myself, like, how much would this reflect, or how much bounce light would catch off of this, or how much would this create a glow onto something else. And so I go through and just try to find all the opportunities of that throughout the piece. The other thing that you're going to see happening here is a really strong bounce from the sand, and then I sort of knock it back depending on how reflective that particular surface is. So you're going to see that sort of popping up throughout the entire image as it goes. This piece, even more so than previous ones, I try to keep everything to be as few layer modes, blend modes as possible, and everything was done with the Turpentine brush, so it's just really trying to make it as painterly as it can be. Before going in and doing some of the background, I just add some extra darkening here. It's a fairly desaturated color, just to really push the fact that he is hunched over that part of his body, and that part of his jean coat is that much darker. And then I erase away where the compass is so that the compass stands out really clearly. If any of you out there played this game and you played all the way through to the end, I hope you dig what I did here, because I don't think this is a game that gets a whole lot of fan art. In fact, if you click like on a hashtag for a dark room, there's almost nothing, except for like me and my friend Jeremy Dale, who also did a piece similar to this. We did them at the same time, by the way. I want to stress that he was probably the first one to finish his, and it was such a fun idea. So shout outs to Jeremy, because he and I were playing this game a lot, and he does some really cool stuff, so find him. He's Valley Dweller, that's his Instagram, except without all the vowels, I think. So try to figure that out. Maybe he'll comment somewhere, like on YouTube or on Instagram or something. So now where I'm at here is trying to think about the background. I'm lightening the background just a little bit, but I'm doing it all with the Turpentine brush. I didn't just make it like a straight brightening. I kept it that blue and then just went in with white and added some of that texture back there just to give a little more interest. And now on that background, I'm going to start wrestling with that to get it to have depth, and to get it to have, just basically to have some form and not just be these flat shapes. Now, as something goes into the distance in perspective, it does flatten out. That's just the nature of it. But I want to make sure that even though it is flattening out, it still reads correctly, as opposed to just looking kind of half-assed, I guess you could say. Because let me tell you, I can half-ass a background. So in this one, I just wanted to make sure that I was taking my time and doing it right. So now we've got these blocked in shadows. We're going to lighten those and add a little bit more form within them. So now we're sort of like recontextualizing what that value is by making it lighter, and then adding the new darkness there, and then adjusting that. We're going to throw in some bounce from the sand as well to try and help push the dimension on all of that, and then we'll add just a lot of atmosphere to knock it back. Eventually everything's going to get like this swirling sand around it, and then towards the end you'll see me add a little bit more to this background, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So now you can see with those added highlights, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of color there, of value. And now we're putting in those bounce lights, the bounce from, sorry, not bounce lights, but the bounce from the sand, since the sand would be quite bright. And now we'll add that extra atmosphere right there, add some of the sky coming down onto the sand, and now here's all the swirling sand that's sort of in the air, just to really sell that environment that he's in. We even put some swirling sand on the front of him. We darkened him a little bit just to vignette him a little, and now I want to get that background to feel like there's a little more depth to it. So we put like a mesa, a plateau, like way in the background, and then we start messing with this one here to try and get that to be a little bit more interesting. And I really do think that it's like these small little tweaks like this that just bring the whole piece home in some ways. last touches for this is the "No Aliens Allowed" thing on his hat. I was writing "No Aliens Allowed" as sort of a nod to a game I worked on at Booyah called "No Zombies Allowed," but then I decided that I couldn't really get that to look sort of like a cool, funny logo, like something that would be on a hat. And also, I mean, just the idea of like "No Aliens Allowed," that just didn't seem like something that would be on a hat. However, the idea of like a gray face with like a red circle and a bar through it, like a, you know, like the Ghostbusters logo with an alien, seemed like, oh yeah, that's more like a hat. That's like something that you would actually find maybe sold at Roswell or something like that, or near Roswell or whatever. So that's what I wanted to do here then, and then I just warp it to get it onto the hat so that it looks correct. And that's actually the last tweak to the entire thing. This is with all the layers turned on, the background done, all of the various lighting things done. You can see here that it still is very rough and messy in spots, but that's totally on purpose, and I think it gives some character and some interest to the overall piece. But I really love the way this one came out. I liked it when I did the line drawing way back when, and I'm just happy that I did this without ruining it, I guess you could say. So I'm pretty happy with it. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing and hitting the notification button so you know when things are getting thrown up on the channel. And otherwise, I'll see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.